On June 16 through 24 of 2014, the Central U.S. Earthquake Consortium held the largest multi-state, multi-sector emergency management exercise, using a legitimate threat to its region as the backdrop.
CUSEC was formed as a direct result of the hazard we share in the central United States. There's central geologic uniquenesses here that allow the earthquake seismic waves to travel very large areas, impacting up to 6 or 7 states. So it's that hazard that creates that common bond that these states need to have. Because of state laws and things that prohibit a lot of interaction, we were created to help give that common point for planning that goes on with respect to response, recovery, and mitigation.
This CAPSTONE-14 exercise is really the second iteration of what we saw in National Level Exercise 11 3 years ago. And it was our first opportunity to test a catastrophic earthquake response exercise. So it was really at that time the biggest exercise we've ever done, and we extracted a lot of important lessons out of it. Most of them were things that we really needed to do a lot better. So that's why we developed the CAPSTONE-14 model, which in essence is very different than the way any other exercise of this magnitude has ever been executed or planned, because it's a state-led function. So instead of the federal government developing the framework and telling us how it's going to operate, the states actually derived our own training goals and objectives to really build it out.
By design, each state was expected to conduct its own internal exercise using its own resources for exercise administration. Multi-state and state-specific learning objectives focused on 6 core areas. Communications, including sharing information.
What's really interesting about CUSEC is that unlike some of the other exercises that we've been involved in, it really pulls in private sector and gives us the opportunity to not only engage directly with government, but also to exercise our own objectives during the course of a perceived real-life event.
Shared situational awareness, including the use of multi-state geospatial pictures. Regional transportation coordination. Private sector integration, including building public-private partnerships at the planning stage.
In the past, all these exercises have been so government-centric that we want to get to a stage ultimately where we don't look at it as a public response or a private response. It is the state response to a catastrophic event.
Regional and national resource allocation, including management and deployment of mission-focused resources. Mobilization support to civil authorities, including integration of military support in preparedness activities. The CUSEC exercise was a model test of the SAFECOM interoperability continuum. The continuum benchmarks the necessary elements of multi-jurisdictional information sharing. It highlights the need to build the right partnerships, establish comprehensive procedures, select and implement tools that support operational needs, test procedures and tools to maintain an optimum level of functionality, and use partnerships, procedures, and tools for all situations, including daily operations, high-risk events, and emergency situations. Key achievements from the exercise span from planning and preparedness activities to the magnitude of data that was shared and managed throughout the exercise. In order to focus the exercise, CUSEC directors identified 18 essential elements of information and forged agreements to share them among each other using a standardized data creation and publishing model that was powered by ArcGIS Online.
I think one of the best things that came out of this exercise for Tennessee was that we now have a regional approach to situational awareness to help develop a common operating picture. We now use a system of essential elements of information to help guide each of the states to figure out what is the most important key elements of information to be able to make decisions. Now that we all have a common list of what these EEIs are, we now have a better situational awareness as a whole.
There's going to be huge areas of concern: electricity, gas lines, oil lines, hazardous materials, and it's going to take all states. It's going to take this nation to pull back where we need to be to recover for all of our citizens. So I think a big takeaway for me is going to be the continued work that needs to happen with all of the states.
we have significantly improved our common operating picture and how we are going to communicate with other states. In the national level exercise, we struggled a lot with trying to get an overall view of what the earthquake was like and how much damage it had. So this time around, we are using a lot of GIS tools, a lot of our web EOC that is creating a better common operating picture for us based off of our locals. And we are sharing that information with our other states, and so it's keeping a better regional picture overall.
Having a regional comp, being able to understand what's going on across the borders, it's invaluable in this business.
Exercise participants concluded the experience with new sustainable tools and processes that will continue to help strengthen their information sharing capacity well into the future. These tools can also be easily adapted by other states, localities, and private sector companies across the country. CAPSTONE-14 serves as a model for future regional exercises, regardless of specific geographic elements, disaster scenario, or level of participants. The methodology can be applied to any exercise, and training materials can easily be adapted.
We really have a proof of concept here that with the deliberate planning efforts and a multi-state coalition of the willing to put these plans together and then most importantly execute those plans in that trained environment, we really have changed the dialogue on how states can truly provide for one another in a complex catastrophe.
CAPSTONE-14 participants shared an unprecedented amount of information. Additional tools that are based on operational needs would help decision makers filter unnecessary data. The exercise yielded several operational leave-behinds that serve as models available to the entire public safety community. Emergency managers around the nation can now test drive these capabilities and download these tools for daily use in their own operational environments from the National Information Sharing Consortium at www.nisconsortium.org.
Right now I could say that the preparedness level from the states that are involved in the CUSEC exercises are as good as anywhere in the world. It's because they're practicing, because they're communicating, because they're sharing, they're working through their systems, but more than anything else, they've developed trust, they've developed communication pathways, and they've developed technologies that can work together.
The Capstone project was so important because it pulled people together in an opportunity to share information and to see the areas that they need to make improvements on, where there are gaps in the technology, where symbology differences don't communicate well, and basically to start building the relationships and identifying the information that is invaluable to make that all work.